It never sleeps. The preseason has started in the NWSL, but that doesn't mean new signings and trades and transfers stop by any means. In fact, they actually pick up. So let's run through some of the biggest transfers. One of the two newest expansion sides, Bay FC, has signed some big players. Nigerian forward Asisato Shwala from Barcelona. We actually had a great interview with her earlier this week, so go back and check that out. Bay has also added former Scottish international Jen Beattie from Arsenal and Ghana's forward Princess Marfo. San Diego Wave have acquired Swedish defender Hanna Ludqvist from Atletico Madrid. Canadian international midfielder Jessie Fleming has transferred from Chelsea to the Portland Thorns. And the Thorns, they also added German midfielder Marie Mueller from Freiburg. Staying on the West Coast, Seattle Reign, they've signed some players, including Welsh internationals midfielder Angard James and defender Lily Woodham. Both of those players coming from England, Angard from Tottenham and Woodham from Reading FC, both on a 2-year contract with Seattle. The Kansas City Current have re-signed their Celebration Queen midfielder Lola Bonta, as well as veteran defender Mallory Weber for a 1-year contract. Plus, the Current, they welcome 2 new players to the league. American-born Argentine international midfielder Sophie Braun, who played most recently with Club Lyon in Liga MX Femenil, as well as midfielder Reagan Stegletter from the Swedish league. Both of those players are signed through 2024 with an option for 2025. The North Carolina Courage have sent on loan, Danish midfielder Mila Geil. She has headed to France to play with Montpellier. The NWSL champions, New Jersey, New York, Gotham FC, they've re-signed free agents goalkeeper Michelle Bedos and midfielder McCall Zerboni. They've also re-signed midfielder Yasmin Ryan, Taryn Torres, and Delaney Sheehan, all to new contracts. So the champions are staying there. Good news for a lot of Gotham fans. Forward for Gotham, Taylor Smith, she has then been sent on loan to the Women's Super League, Brighton. We'll talk more about the European women's football later in this episode. But there's some other European news that has happened. After 9 seasons, Barcelona goalkeeper Sandra Paños announced that she will leave the club at the end of the season. She posted on social media making her decision to, quote, take on new professional challenges at the end of the current season. Also, Brighton, they've decided to part ways with head coach Melissa Phillips after just 10 months at the helm. The Seagulls, they sit second from the bottom in the Super League table in 10th place. Defender Ava Gaetano out of Notre Dame. She's a 2-time ACC Defender of the Year and one of the top young prospects collegiately this year. She registered for the NWSL draft and then ultimately withdrew before the draft started. She has now signed with PSG. So Ava Gaetano will be playing with her former Fighting Irish teammate and new U.S. senior national team midfielder Corbin Albert. These moves keep on coming, ladies. Sandra, what stands out to you among this giant list of news?
I don't even know where to start, honestly. Like I was listening to you just sort of like rattling it off, and at the same time I was just like, yep, that's why we do what we do. That's why you see Attacking Third not once, not twice, multiple times a week, because of all of this stuff that kind of ends up dropping along the way. I think maybe in a generalized kind of reaction, maybe we shouldn't be too surprised that it's a slew of Europeans or overseas and international players that we're starting to see this influx of announced signings for NWSL. I'm going to just echo what you said about Asisa El Shwala. Everyone needs to go check out the interview that we had with her and all of the great coverage that we did across our platforms and kind of welcoming her arrival to NWSL. But going down the list of seeing some of these international signings finally get announced, right? I think with that deadline day, you're kind of wondering, like, what does that mean? Well, it looks like it means that international players are finally getting through that fax machine for the league, and teams are able to make these announcements, and we get to celebrate them and talk about them a bit on the show. But I think maybe the other ones that are probably really big for me, I like the move with Jessie Fleming to the Thorns. I think it's massive for them, honestly. For a little while there, when we were looking at some of the movement, some of the player departures specifically for that team, maybe there's some question marks around, well, what is that going to mean for this team moving forward? And even if you look in the early phase of the offseason where they lose a player in Crystal Dunn, at that time, you're like, they're actually going to be fine because they've got a number of players that can kind of rotate in and out of that midfield can be those game changers, whether it's Sam Coffey or Olivia Moultrie. And at the time, maybe referencing a Rocky Rodriguez, but then we saw this player get traded away to Angel City. So question marks, right? But the fact that they're getting Jessie Fleming in, I think this is going to be a player that they can continue to help kind of build around for Thorns. And it's coming, I think, at a really, really good time for this franchise because they're kind of entering this new era of Thorns football with a new ownership group in place. What is that going to look like? How are they going to sort of redefine what Thorns culture is moving forward? And part of that is maybe making a signing for players like this and kind of building with and around them.
I love that, Sandra. And I feel like one of the things that when I hear you talking, especially about Portland, I'm excited to see Jessie Fleming also with a chip on her shoulder. This is a player who played really well for Chelsea for years and now is not getting that consistent playing time. So what's better than coming to a place where you know a few familiar faces with Christine Sinclair and Janine Becky in that squad or Canadian teammate. So I'm excited for that Moultrie Fleming 1-2 punch. I think you can play him as dual 8s, almost dual 10s in moments because they can be slippery in the attacking third. They can play a final pass, but also they have that little bit of grit and could be anchored by Sam Coffey. So I'm excited by that. But I'm going to go to Bay FC because we talked about one key player who I think everybody now is going to go listen to that interview that you guys had with Ashwala. But I think Jen Beattie is really interesting because during the draft, we had an opportunity to talk to Albertine Montoya about how he wants to build a team. And he said the one player he was going to be mad at got picked number 1 was Savvy King, and he wouldn't have been able to get her at 2. Well, the stars aligned. He gets Savvy King at 2, and he talked about making a generational player at the club. And the way you build a generational player is with players around her who have the experience. Now she has Beattie next to her, 15 years as an international, dozens of years, a few years at Arsenal. This is a player with the experience to nurture someone next to her like a Savvy King into being that player who is a generational talent, not just for Bay FC, but really for the U.S. women's national team one day. I love that signing. And can I add one more note really quick that we just learned from our broadcast superstar, Jen Cooper, Keeper Notes on Twitter. She said that this is the biggest offseason when it comes to internationals, which we're not surprised about, right, guys? As of today, February 2nd, there are 23 new players, international players that have now joined NWSL. That is a milestone we have to celebrate. We have to keep pushing because that's how we continue to push this league to be one of the best in the world.
Love that.
I have to chime in. I think that was like really serendipitous that you chose Beattie because of course I was going right for Jen Beattie, especially after seeing the project that Bay are putting together. She has the most header goals in WSL. Okay, so she has goal scoring ability for Arsenal. She showed out. She is a string puller in terms of just connecting passes and kind of making things go in that back line. She's got so much experience. And I feel like when you look for an expansion side like it has, which we're seeing kind of these big puzzle pieces fall into place for them with Asisat Oshoala and also Dana Castellanos, I am really seeing where they're leaning and what's going to be ahead. And now I'm getting really, really excited about their first match against Angel City in March. But I think that with Beattie, they really get more bang for their buck. I think it's beneficial for her too, because she's seen a decline in her minutes this season. She was a massive part of their Champions League run last season. I'm really, really excited to see what she can do on U.S. soil now.
There's so many moving parts, and having all these internationals in the league, it does help and it does change things. With Portland signing Mueller just happened right before we went live. It's actually 24 internationals right now. And that number is counting. It's still going up. And honestly, you have to look at the landscape of football. Last year, there was a World Cup. So a lot of the players that came were looking to get more time and more minutes with that World Cup absence. There's not a World Cup this year. So we're getting big superstar internationals to come play here in the NWSL.
Can I just add one more thing? And also, there was a lot of movement in the offseason with free agency and a lot of delays in an additional salary cap. So that delayed all of these movements a little bit longer than maybe we would have liked. But I think we're all sitting here celebrating where this league is continuing to grow and how it's including so many superstars from around the world.
And I think it's important to note maybe like the re-signings too. I think those are like, maybe we're rightfully getting excited about these major international signings, but I think, Labonte re-signing with Kansas City, massive.
For me, Yasmin Ryan, especially, I feel like she did not get nearly the hype that she deserves for Gotham. And for that re-signing, bravo, especially of that group.
Big.
A lot of these news are coming out after fans have seen players listed on preseason rosters for these clubs. The re-signing and the signing of contracts, whether it's on loan, whether it's a new player, whether it's just re-signing a contract, it has to go through a process within the league, basically to be re-employed by the league. So it's almost as if you're getting hired and you have to go through a re-onboarding process. So it takes a little bit for these announcements to come because the clubs are following it by the book, making sure they don't get fined by things like that, waiting for all the paperwork to be approved by the league, and then they get announced. So more of these announcements are for sure to come in the coming days within the NWSL and across the landscape of the sport here in the States.